Most people associate Thailand with beaches, nightlife, and tourism. It's a country that feels vibrant and welcoming on the surface. But like anywhere else, the internet tells a different story. Beneath the travel vlogs and street food videos, there are corners of the Thai internet that most people never see. Posts that circulate briefly before disappearing, live streams that spread faster than they can be taken down, and stories that begin online and end somewhere far worse. This is horrors on the Thai internet. There's a Thai language internet forum and community website, often described as the Reddit of Thailand, called Pantip. It's a place to discuss a range of topics, including technology and entertainment, to politics and lifestyle, and is ranked one of the most top 10 visited websites in Thailand and 712 worldwide. But it would come to everybody's surprise when, on December 5th, 2014, a post was uploaded to the site with an incredibly eerie title. A body was found in an abandoned building. Hello, this is my first post, which is more of an introduction than a post about myself, but I had a trip that I'll remember for a long time. Today I went to a currently popular photo spot, but I found a deceased person while walking down and taking pictures. My problem was, I called the Narinthorn Emergency Centre to report what I found, but the female officer advised me that I had to notify the police first, before they could take any action. I hung up and dialed 191, which is Thailand's emergency hotline, but the line was busy. I couldn't get through no matter how many times I called. I was on the BTS station using a public phone, and had to walk down to the traffic police booth, but no one was there. I had to walk back up to the BTS station again, but Narinthorn and 191 still weren't answering. I called 199, which is Thailand's fire emergency services, and a female officer answered. Thankfully she asked for my name, but said she could only listen to my story and what I'd experienced, and suggested I call 193. I didn't know what number that was, but the line was busy again. At that point, I lost hope in the police's work, and thought that 199 would at least take the report. I took the train intending to go home, but I felt uneasy. When I got off at my final station, I went to find a police officer and explained what I had found and asked how I could check if the body had been removed. The police officer was very helpful. Since it was a different district, they suggested I try calling the local police. So I said to the officer, then just leave it to dry. To summarise, how can I check if the body has been removed? I've informed 199 that the body is above the 30th floor, up the small staircase and at the back of the building. The room is on the left, and the body is in the bathroom. If they can't find it, I can take them there. I've been to this place both during the day and at night, and I don't plan to go again, because I've already experienced and photographed enough. The security guard allowed us to go up. The third time I sneaked up because they didn't allow it anymore. When I came down, I sneaked out to call the police. Will I be charged with trespassing if I tell this story? And does the security guard know what's upstairs? When I returned from my second trip, I couldn't sleep for days. It was as if it was calling me to go again. I don't really believe in these things, but after the second visit, I had a strange feeling like someone was following me or calling out to me, but I thought I was just imagining things. What I want to know is whether they've taken the body down yet, so I can have proof that I'm not hallucinating or imagining things. I want the body taken down. It's about to explode. I admit I was very shocked, but if I hadn't kept my composure, I would have fallen to my death. The place he was referring to is the Sathorn Unique Tower. If you've ever seen photos of an abandoned skyscraper in Bangkok covered in graffiti and looming over the city, it was probably this building. Rising 185 meters into the air, it was meant to be a luxury high-rise in the early 1990s and part of a skyline that was expanding almost overnight. Construction began in 1990, during a period when Bangkok's economy was booming and cranes dominated the skyline. The project was developed by architect Rangsan Torsuan, who had already made millions selling beachfront condos in Pattaya. Units in the tower were pre-sold before it was even finished. But in 1997, the Asian financial crisis hit, now referred to in Thailand as the Tom Yum Goong crash. The baht was suddenly devalued, investors pulled out, and hundreds of major construction projects across the country stopped almost immediately. This tower was about 80% complete when work was abandoned, and it has remained that way ever since. Today, the building is widely known as the Ghost Tower. Some locals say it was built on top of an old graveyard, but whether that's true or not is unclear. The concrete shell stands empty, covered in graffiti and litter, its floors exposed to the elements. Climbing it has technically been illegal since 2014, but that hasn't stopped people. Urban explorers still make their way inside, often bribing the security guard at the entrance. At one point, tourists were reportedly paying a few hundred baht just to wander through the unfinished hallways and film videos on the rooftop. Near the entrance, there's even a small makeshift spirit shrine. Bottles of red soda sit beside burned incense, offerings left for whatever people believe might still linger there. Back on Pantip, the post immediately gained traction. Some users took it seriously, but others didn't. A few suggested he'd imagined it, or that he'd seen a ghost. If he was a photographer, they asked, why hadn't he taken a picture? As the thread continued, someone advised him to contact JS100, a well-known traffic and emergency radio station in Bangkok. He eventually called in and explained what he had seen. From there, JS100 coordinated with the Pawtek Tung Foundation, a rescue service, and arranged for a team to enter the building. When they first went up, they couldn't find anything. For a while it seemed possible that the post had been exaggerated, or that whatever he thought he saw wasn't there at all. They searched floor after floor before reaching the 43rd. At around 10:20 p.m, inside a bathroom on that floor, they found the body of a man. From here, they contacted the Yanawa police station, which sent a forensics team to the site. His identity would later be revealed as 35-year-old Stig Johan Christian Hammersten. According to police reports, he had been dead for approximately a week before he was discovered, a detail that made the case all the more disturbing. Police also found a Swedish driving permit, some credit cards and business cards, as well as a can of beer, a packet of cigarettes, and an empty food container. The body was taken to the Police General Hospital for an autopsy, and officials asked the Swedish embassy to notify relatives. The cause of death was later confirmed as self-inflicted. It was August 2019 when a family in Sakon Nakhon reported their daughter missing. At first, it was treated like any other disappearance. Police began tracing her last known movements, speaking to people she had contacted, and tried to build a timeline. As the investigation progressed, attention started to narrow toward one man. When officers eventually located him and entered his home in Bangkok, they began searching the property room by room. What they found inside would quickly shift the case from a missing person investigation to something far more disturbing. The discovery made national headlines, and the man at the center of it would soon be given a name by Thai media that stuck: the ice metal casket killer. The man police were now looking at was Apichai Ongwisit. He was 40 years old and came from a wealthy background. His father, Chalamchai Ongwisit, had once been a prominent real estate figure. Decades earlier, in 1983, Chalamchai had been arrested in connection with the killing and destruction of a 15-year-old girl. Before the case could go to trial, he was shot and killed. Reports at the time suggested he had intended to argue that his wife had orchestrated the crime, but with him dead, the case never unfolded in court. Not long after, his wife left the country with their daughter. Beyond that history, there wasn't much publicly known about Apichai himself. He largely stayed out of the spotlight, but that changed in August 2019. During that time, a 22-year-old woman named Warrenthorn Chaya Chet filed a report with the Royal Thai Police, claiming that she had been physically assaulted by several men. Soon after making the report, she stopped responding to investigators and disappeared completely. When officers tried to contact her again, they learned her family had already reported her missing. As police worked through the case, they received information from a man named Chalamshon Ngabua, who had been arrested on a drug offence. In exchange for leniency, he told officers about his former employer, Apichai Ongwisit. He claimed that while working as a security guard at Apichai's home, he became aware of a woman being held there. According to his statement, Apichai had struck the woman and confined her inside a metal casket. He alleged she was kept there for 2 days before dying from suffocation, and that her body was later placed in a large plastic bag and buried in the garden. With that information, police obtained a search warrant for Apichai's estate in Bangkok, and what they discovered was incredibly disturbing. Warrenthorne's body had been buried on the property, wrapped in a black plastic bag and weighed down beneath a metal gate and a steel box. Officers were able to identify her by a tattoo on her back. The woman who had filed a report just days earlier had been there the entire time. While in custody, Apichai admitted to killing her. He said he had become jealous and was afraid she was going to leave him. According to him, he locked her inside a steel casket one night before going to sleep. When he woke up the next morning, he said she was unresponsive and had suffocated during the night. He told police he then wrapped her body in plastic and buried her on the property. As the story began to circulate in Thai media, he was given a nickname that would stick: Ice Heap Lek, the Ice Metal Casket Killer. Once Apichai was in custody, people in the neighbourhood began talking. With Warrenthorne already found on the property, people in the area started saying they didn't think she was the only one. Some told officers they had always felt something wasn't right about the house. There were stories about the pond in the garden, about how he supposedly kept large flesh-eating fish there, and about what he might have been feeding them. That was enough for police to bring in divers. They drained sections of the pond and began searching it methodically. On January 16, 2020, divers pulled out 28 pieces of human rib bone, along with strands of hair. Early estimates suggested the remains could belong to a teenage girl, somewhere between 17 and 18 years old. The next day, they recovered another 288 fragments of human bone from the same pond. These had been wrapped up and weighed down with heavy dumbbells. Then, on January 23rd, officers discovered at least 30 more bone fragments inside a metal casket submerged in the water. Initial assessments suggested the remains were likely female, with investigators suggesting the remains could have belonged to at least 3 girls, with the youngest possibly being just 12 years old. As the case moved through the courts, Warrenthorne's mother, Suktapon Chayachet, joined prosecutors as a co-plaintiff, along with Warrenthorne's child. They pushed for the sentence in this case to be added to the prison terms Apichai had already received in drug-related cases. In court, prosecutors laid out what they believed happened between August 4th and August 6th, 2019. They said Apichai had detained Warrenthorne inside his house in Bangkok, assaulted her repeatedly, and caused her death. Afterward, they said he worked with accomplices to bury her body and conceal what had happened. Apichai admitted to burying and hiding the body, but he denied intentionally killing her. He claimed he assaulted her during an argument and that her death wasn't planned. The court heard testimony that he had beaten her with an iron bar, striking her head and body, before binding her hands and ankles and forcing her into a metal casket inside the house. Judges rejected his claim that he had acted in sudden anger because she wanted to end the relationship and return to her husband. They also dismissed his explanation that her injuries were caused by a dumbbell falling after he threw her. Autopsy results showed severe internal bleeding in her chest cavity from a heavy blow, which the court said was consistent with the prosecution's version of events. In the end, the court sentenced Apichai to life imprisonment for his crimes. He was also ordered to pay compensation of 2.9 million baht, which is just over £68,000, or $92,000, to Warrenthorne's mother and to her child. It was the afternoon of October 4th, 2004, when officers from Damnoen Saduak police station received a call about a possible homicide at a rural home in Ratchaburi province, Thailand. When they arrived, In the center of the main room lay the body of 12-year-old Prapatsorn Jamcharoen. She had suffered a fatal injury to her throat, and the smell of blood still lingered in the air when officers arrived. As police continued their search in the home, they quickly realized that this wasn't a murder in the traditional sense. The young girl was part of a sacrifice, and the ones who sacrificed her were much closer than the police had realized. The house belonged to the Jamcharoen family. Living there were 4 women: Kanjana Jamcharoen, 50 years old, her mother, Bua, 68, and her 2 sisters, Anong, 45, and Jarin, 32, and of course, 12-year-old Prapatsorn. They weren't isolated from the community by any means. The family were fruit farmers of moderate means, known locally, and living a relatively ordinary rural life. But they were also known for something else. For years, the sisters had practiced rituals centered around the worship of Indra, and they would occasionally invite villagers from the surrounding area to take part in ceremonies at the house. Indra is a figure from ancient Indian religion, often described as a god connected to the sky, thunder, storms, rain, and war. In older Hindu texts, he's portrayed as the king of the gods, someone who defeats powerful evil forces and restores balance to the world. One of the central stories about him is that he kills a being named Vritra, who was blocking rivers and holding back prosperity, and by doing so, he brings rain and sunlight back to humanity. He's usually depicted riding a white elephant and holding a thunderbolt. In certain religious traditions, including Jain belief, there's a story where a spiritual figure cuts off his hair as a symbol of renouncing the world, and Indra receives that hair in his hands. The act of cutting hair can represent purification, release, or a transition from one state of existence to another. The Jamcharoen sisters had built their beliefs around this figure. They worshipped Indra, holding ceremonies in his name, and even inviting villagers in the area to participate in various rituals. They believed in possession, in ritual, in spiritual cleansing, and in the idea that certain acts could liberate a soul or remove evil from the world. But over time, those beliefs stopped being private rituals and started becoming something far more intense. In the days leading up to October 4th, Kanjana, who was Prapatsorn's mother, had been in what could only be described as a trance. She claimed she was acting as a medium and receiving instructions. During this period, she told her sister Anong to cut down all of the coconut trees in the garden beside the house. No one really understood why, as they had been there for years, and she didn't really give an explanation. Then, 2 days before everything happened at around 3 in the morning on October 2nd, Anong walked to the home of an elderly neighbour, village elder Boon Som, who lived about 500 metres away. Being woken up at that hour made him think something serious had happened, so he followed her back to the house. Upstairs, he saw an altar set up. Anong told him to sit down, close his eyes, and meditate. She said he had wronged Indra in a previous life and needed to correct it. He sat there with his eyes half open, unsure of what he'd walked into. After a short while, he made an excuse and left. The next night, around 10 o'clock, Anong returned to his house again. This time, he refused to go with her. Whatever was happening inside that home was no longer something he wanted to be part of. Then, in the early hours of October 4th, at around 2 in the morning, people living nearby heard a child screaming. It cut through the quiet of the village, then stopped just as suddenly as it started. The next day, police were guarding the front entrance to the house, and what was waiting for them inside was nothing short of horrifying. Prapatsorn had been killed by her aunt, Anong. By the time officers arrived, she'd been dead for around 10 hours. She was lying in the middle of the room, and the scene around her showed that what had happened inside that house was more than just a killing. A large amount of her hair had been cut off and placed into a basin of water beside a table that had been arranged for a ritual, likely for Indra. Outside, her mattress and clothing had been dragged out and burned. Police began moving through the rest of the house, searching for whoever else was inside. As they began looking through each room, they couldn't find anyone. That was until they heard chanting. It was coming from behind a locked bedroom door. The voices were repetitive, spoken in Pali. Officers knocked and ordered whoever was inside to open it, but there was no response and the chanting continued. Left with no other option, the police forced the door open. All 4 women were inside, deep in a trance. As soon as they saw the police, they began shouting. 2 of them grabbed knives, and officers had to move quickly to avoid being struck as the women lashed out. In the struggle, they were yelling, sweating, and resisting being restrained, even calling out for some divine intervention to stop the police from arresting them. Outside, neighbours had gathered near the house. Some of the women broke free and ran toward the coconut grove, stumbling through the trees. People called out their names, trying to get them to stop, but they kept running until officers caught up and restrained them. All 4 were taken into custody and brought to Damnoan Saduak police station. During questioning, Kanjana spoke about Indra. She said she'd been in a trance before the incident and had received instructions. She talked about cutting down the coconut trees and about carrying out a ritual, and claimed her daughter had brought misfortune, and what happened was meant to remove something evil. Investigators later learned that Kanjana had been sexually assaulted and had given birth to Prapatsorn as a result at the age of 17. Over the years, she struggled with her mental health, though she described it as spirit possession and communication with Indra. All 4 women were sent for psychiatric evaluation. Kanjana, who was seen as the central figure in the belief system inside that house, remained under psychiatric care. She was the one receiving instructions, the one entering trances, and the one shaping the narrative around Indra. Because she was seen as the primary source of the shared delusion and showed the most entrenched symptoms, it's widely believed she was never fully released back into society. As for the sisters, there have been unconfirmed reports that some of the younger women were eventually released after years of treatment, once the shared belief system began to dissolve without Kanjana's influence. Their identities have largely been protected, reportedly to allow them to reintegrate back into society. It's been 22 years since this incident occurred, but is still widely seen as one of the most disturbing cases to have ever come from Thailand.